Hey guys, so this is the video I do at the end of every season where I give the season ranking and I also individually rank each baddie. So for this season, I'm going to give Baddies Africa a D. Wasn't a good season in my opinion. Was it the worst we've seen? No, but it definitely was on the worst end. So last time when I rated the seasons, you see I had South as number 1, West as number 2, Midwest 3, Caribbean 4, East 5, and ATL 6. My current update is West is now my number 1 because I have rewatched West and South this year and I feel like West is more enjoyable. So I switched those out, now giving West a A- and South a B+. 3 is still Midwest at a B-. I also switched up East and Caribbean. I do feel like East was a very dark season with Smiley having the seizure and the miscarriage and Tasiki getting jumped by Krishan in March. Like, it was a very dark season. Now that I look back at it, now that a while has passed, East is more memorable, even though it is very dark. I can barely remember what went on Caribbean, even though I feel like it was more enjoyable than East and like lighthearted when I was actually watching it. So currently I'm going to give East the 4th spot with a C-. I'm going to put Africa in between East and Caribbean, giving it a D. I'm going to move Caribbean down to a D+ because it's just not memorable. And I feel like they had a lot of duds and like forgettable girls that we don't really care about now. And then ATL remains at 7 as the worst season. I really don't think there's going to be a season that's ever going to be worse than ATL. So now we're going to get into my individual rankings for each girl, you know, A, B, C, D, F. Now, I usually just give y'all the grade and the reason, but this time I'm also going to tell you how many times this person was given LVB or MVB by me, which means if I gave them the most valuable OG, newbie, or new G at the end of my video during the season, I'm counting that as a point. So I counted up all the least valuable times and all the most valuable times, and that also weighed into who I gave what grade. So first we're going to start with our Fs. We got Amber Rose, Natalie, and Latina. I didn't give Amber Rose a least or most valuable at any point during the season because she was extremely boring. She wasn't there for that many episodes and she really didn't bring anything, honestly. Her niece brought a little bit more than she did. Moving on to her niece, Latina Rose, while she did bring some drama, she basically came out of nowhere being like a Chinyan for Natalie, trying to take DTB out and just kept getting washed by DTB. DTB didn't go nowhere, and then she ended up just getting quiet. So she was a waste of space as well and a waste of time. Natalie gets a F per usual. You know, she did a lot of pump faking this season, trying to act tough, but she really ain't tough. When Diamond dragged her, she wanted Pretty P to get Diamond for her. Pretty P wasn't going for that. So then she got mad and said she wasn't going to fix Pretty P watch that she said she was been supposed to fix because Summer threw it in the pool. She been encouraging the big three to do all this BS, like throw shit and all that extra stuff all season. You know, still rewarded Dolly with a Baddies chain after all she did this season. The beefing with Scotty and Anna at the beginning of the season. Ducking smoke from Rollie at the reunion. You got your lick back on Diamond, but then you didn't want to give her the fair round when she kept asking you to run it over and over again. You act like you don't got beef with Tommy, but then when Rollie and Tommy made up, you was allegedly behind the scenes trying to get them to start beefing again. Fauna had to check you throughout the season. Low-key, Cole Killer and K-Rican did too. You know, like Rollie said, you didn't get to know them. You didn't even know their names. And they knew that you was picking sides when it came to them and Summer, Dolly, and Lex. Latina was never a most valuable baddie for me, but she was at least viable for 5 episodes, and I really think she only was on 5 episodes. So I think she was the least valuable for every single episode she was on. She was either being annoying, trying to fight Diamond for no reason for Natalie, or she was quiet. And Natalie was one of my least valuable OGs for 24 out of 25 episodes, and she was never a most valuable, so yeah. Moving on to the Ds, so we've got Marissa, Elsie, and Russian with a D. I gave Marissa a most valuable baddie 1 time and a least valuable baddie 3 times. I feel like the only time I gave her the most valuable baddie was when she came in at first. You know, Summer started with her and she did kind of do good her first round with Summer when she first came in the house. But besides that, Marissa didn't really bring much. And after Summer started whooping her back, you could tell that she couldn't really take a hit. Once she started getting hit and she wasn't doing all the hitting, she was ready to go. She was mad about the marks on her face. So it was just like, yeah, okay. Like, you're not really built for the show. But, I mean, I didn't dislike her. I just think it wasn't the environment for her. She didn't bring too much to the show. Elsie and Russian, I feel like they one and the same. They both did a lot of shit talking behind the scenes, stirring the pot. But then whenever they got confronted, they was getting punched in their face, not doing shit. They wasn't on that. Towards the middle and end of the season, they both started trying to buck up a little bit, but were quickly humbled. And yeah, again, I just don't think either one of them was a good fit for the show either. Out of the 3, I will give Elsie a little bit of props for actually coming to the reunion and sticking the whole season out. You know, Russian left in the middle of the season towards the end and she didn't come to the reunion. And then Marissa also wasn't there for the whole season either, but she did come to the reunion. My D pluses are going to be Stunner Girl, Summer, and Dolly. I gave Stunner a D plus because she was only on a couple episodes this season, and I don't really feel like she did her big one when she came, with the situation with Anna. Also, we know what she did behind the scenes with Ivory, getting Ivory jumped at the beginning of the season, and she never faced Ivory for that after the fact. Summer and Dolly get a D plus because they were more interesting than Marissa, Elsie, and Russian. They brought more to the season, but I do feel like everything they brought this season was disgusting. And they did the most extreme acts that I just couldn't get past. Dolly mentioning Rosa Parks, Summer mentioning Emmett Till, them throwing shit. It's just too much for me. Elsie, I gave least viable 17 times, and I never gave her a most viable. I also never gave Russian a most viable, but she was a least viable 16 times. Stunner Girl only was on 1 or 2 episodes. I think only one. And the one episode she was on, I did give her LVB for how the whole situation went with Anna. Summer, I never gave her any most viables this season. She was my least viable 15 times. And Dolly was my least viable 17 times. But she was my most viable 4 times towards the end of the season and during the reunion. Okay, so now we're moving on to our C's. So my C minuses are Lex and Tavy. Lex goes right along with Summer and Dolly. She's only slightly above them because she didn't do as extreme things as they did. She didn't throw shit. She didn't speak ill of any black figures or mention them in a crazy way like Summer and Dolly did. But she did have that same nasty, volatile attitude and demeanor that they had this season. She was doing a lot of crashing out, crying over wigs, being a hypocrite because she also threw someone's wig in the fire throughout the season. So yeah, that's just that. And then Tavy, she's a lapdog for Natalie. Towards the middle of the season, I feel like I gained a bit of respect for her because of how she was just continuously standing up to Lex, not letting Lex play with her, even though she knew she was going to lose. She would continue to stand up for herself. So I did have to respect that. But towards the end of the season and the reunion, she just proved to me again why I didn't like her in the beginning, which is that she's a lapdog for Natalie. So it's unfortunate because Tavy's from my city, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to fuck with Tavy. Even what I'm seeing coming up on the next season with Baddies USA, I don't really think I'm a favor Tavy. So it is what it is. Lex was my least valuable baddie 9 times. Tavy was my least valuable baddie 6 times. Lex was my most valuable baddie 4 times. And Tavy was my most valuable baddie 8 times. So next we got the C's, Scotty, Anna, Choco, and Tommy. So we could start with Anna and Choco. I feel like Anna was only there for a couple episodes, so I couldn't rank her too high. But I did really like her in the episode she was in. She won the fight with Stunner Girl. She stood up to Natalie. She won those fights. I liked her at the reunion. She did duck a little bit of smoke, I feel, when it came to Lex and low-key Cold Killer. But I did like that she stood up for Marissa. She was like, my friend not going to get jumped. I'm not standing for that. You know what I mean? So I did like Anna overall this season, but I couldn't give her an A or B because she barely was on Baddies Africa. But for what she was there for, I did like her. Choco also didn't come at the beginning of the season, and she didn't stay till the end of the season. Now, she didn't leave on her own terms. She left because of her passport issues, so we're not going to really penalize her for that. But I felt like it was a similar situation to Anna. Like, I can't rank you too high or too low because I also really like Choco. I think she came in strong. I didn't really like how her and DTB fought, but it was DTB's fault because DTB punched her in the face first. And then she kind of just stayed on that with DTB for a while until she got tired of it. And then when Choco got tired of it, DTB wanted to keep going. Choco started saying she was sick. And, she had a lot of excuses. And she did seem over it by the time she ran into those passport issues. So I don't know if she would have even been able to make it the whole season or what. But I think she would have. So I'm going to keep her at a C. She definitely was a nice addition to Baddies Africa. And I did appreciate her being a native African. Because I really didn't like Elsie. And I feel like we needed to have at least one person who was really from Africa that we really enjoyed. So I'm glad Choco served that purpose. Next, we got Tommy. Tommy was only on 2 episodes of this season. She was only on episodes 18 and 19. I think we saw some cameos of her on 20 and 21 in the club, but she wasn't actually in the scene with the girls. So that's part of the reason why she couldn't get an A or B. She also couldn't get an A or B for me because, like I told y'all, I felt like she came back kind of punking out. You came and popped people on Baddies Midwest, which was only aired at the beginning of 2025. So it was only like probably 6 months, if that, before Baddies Africa was filmed. And you was kind of ducking smoke with Rollie, talking about you don't want to embarrass your kids. Like, did you care about embarrassing your kids when you came with a BB and shot 2 people? And then from what I'm hearing on Baddies USA, she getting tore through left and right, getting beat up left and right. And she's still trying to bring weapons or bring other people to fight her battles. So, I do feel like Tommy is an old ass loser, no shade, a drunk. She's older than Natalie. and she just still on the same bullshit. And then it's like she don't stand on business. I feel like nobody ever been scared of Tommy hands. People only scared of Tommy being crazy and using weapons. It's always a blade in her mouth. It's always a taser. It's always a BB. It's always a, oh, I'm gonna run you over with my car. Like going back to Love and Hip Hop, Jocelyn only got a restraining order on Tommy because she tried to run her over. Not because Tommy hit her. Nobody was scared of Tommy hands. Jocelyn just didn't want to get ran over because it's always something extra with this bitch. Like it can never just be a clean fight because you know you can't fight. So I really don't respect Tommy like, but I do know the anticipation and the energy she brings for the fans. You know, with her grand entrances and stuff like that. Y'all appreciate that and that excites y'all. And they definitely build it up every time she comes. So I will give her that for her impact on the show. So yeah, she's just going to be a C. Scotty also gets a C. I feel like Scotty was pretty mid this season. She definitely was speaking up for herself more, but she wasn't trying to get in the paint as much. And if she did want to get in the paint, I do feel like she was picking and choosing. Obviously, one of the people that she didn't really want to fight like that was Lex, but when she had to, she did, and she stood her ground and she did her thing. So, you know, it was times where I was with Scotty, and then it was times where I was like, okay, Scotty, you need to stop talking if you don't really want to continuously get in the paint. You know, you being Lemmy girlfriend don't mean you're not going to get in the paint. So right now, Scotty's a C as well, you know, just in the middle. And then my C plus is Pretty P. Pretty P was pretty quiet in the middle of the season, and she did leave for a little while but first of all, I do respect that she left the show for her grandfather's funeral, went and dealt with her family business, but then came back and fulfilled her contract. Like, you know, I'm going to come finish out the season. I'm going to come to the reunion. I'm going to do what I got to do. I respected that. I also respected how she stood on business with Summer behind her watch. I respected how she stood on business behind DTB. She didn't go and just swing on DTB because Natalie told her to. And then Natalie tried to play in her face and say, oh, now I'm not going to get the watch fixed that Summer broke. And I like how she stood on business with Dolly at the reunion because she tore through Dolly. She definitely got her lick back from any time that people wanted to say Dolly beat her up before. So I respect Pretty P. She got a C plus. She was my most valuable on Midwest because I feel like she was more active and she was more in the paint. So while she was a little bit more quiet this season, I still respected her morals and most of the stuff that she did. You know, there was a few times when her, Ivory, and DTB kind of did a little bit much as a trio for me. Just like K-Rican, Cold Killer, and Fauna had those moments. But overall, I did like both of those trios way more than I liked Lex, Summer, and Dolly this season. All right, now we're going to move on to our Bs. So for my B, I have K-Rican. K-Rican was a very funny character to me this season. I felt like she had good reads. She had personality. She made me laugh. She couldn't fight, but you know, that's not all there is to a reality show. You do need personality. I do just feel like towards the end of the season and especially the reunion, she threw me off. That outfit she came out in at the reunion was a mess. Then we started to hear all like the druggy rumors about her and kind of seeing her nodding out and stuff. So it's like a lot of the personal stuff with her outside of the show is not good. You know, I'm hearing about her running off on services, just being a tacky individual outside of the show. So that kind of throws me off from her. But what she did on this season, I did like. You know, she couldn't fight, but she ran her mouth. She was able to read. She had personality, and she wasn't afraid to get in the paint. You know, the same shit everybody says about Summer. I felt like K-Rican had a similar vibe, but she just wasn't as reckless and disgusting as Summer. Like, she wasn't throwing shit. But I did like K-Rican, so I gave her a B. Now we're going to move on to our B pluses. We got Ivory and Cold Killer. Oh, I just realized I didn't tell y'all how many times I gave some of those girls on the last slide most and least valuable. So let me go back, and then we'll come back to Ivory and Cold Killer. Okay, so I gave Tommy a most valuable once, a least valuable never, even though she low-key should have got a least valuable for that episode, Duck and Smoke with Rollie. The only reason I didn't make her a least valuable was because I knew the anticipation that she brung. So I just didn't give her a least or a most for that episode. Choco, I gave her a least valuable baddie once. I gave her a most valuable baddie 4 times. I gave Anna a most valuable baddie 5 times. I gave her a least valuable never this season. Scotty got 3 least valuables this season, and she got 8 most valuables. Pretty P got 7 most valuables, and she did not get any least valuables. Oh no, she actually did get 1 least valuable. Okay, so now back to our B pluses and Bs. K-Rican, I gave her most valuable 8 times. I gave her least valuable twice. I gave Ivory least valuable once. I gave her most valuable 13 times. I gave Cole K most valuable 9 times. And she never got a least valuable from me this season. Ivory was the one person this season I felt like Summer, Dolly, and Lex didn't really want that with. You know, I think Lex knew that Ivory was the only person in the house this season that could really go toe-to-toe with her. She had enough of that last season, and she'd rather just play it cool with Ivory this season. Summer, Ivory beat her down to the ground at the beginning of the season. She didn't really want that after. And then Dolly kept saying she was injured after her and Ivory fought that first time when Ivory was drunk. Then Dolly tried to grab the knife. And then from there, she just kept ducking Ivory, saying her hand was injured until the day Ivory left, when her hand magically healed, and then she was able to throw shit and fight Cold Killer. So overall, I did like Ivory this season. The only reason I gave her a B plus was because she did not come to the reunion. She didn't finish the season out, and there were a few things she did this season that I didn't like. I didn't like her holding Tavy's arms behind her back, putting her in a headlock while Tavy was fighting Cold Killer. I didn't really like her playing security for DTB at times, like when she fought Choco. And I didn't like what caused the fight with her and Dolly. You know, she knew she wasn't cool with Dolly. So going up to Dolly in the club and doing this to her and thinking she was going to go for that because Summer went for that, or that's what the girls on Now That's TV would go for, was a mistake. But overall, I did fuck with Ivory this season, B plus. Now, Cold Killer is another B plus for me this season. I felt like she had the most quotables from this season, like with Usha Usha, with I Hope the Cameras Caught Dolly Ducking Wrecking This Bitch, even with her singing her song, you know, with Diamond, you know, the issue about the it's a real baddie party, you cannot get in, I could take your man, pass him to my friend. But yeah, I think she had a big personality. I respected the fact that she also had a lot of heart, just like K Rican, even though they weren't the best fighters. She always got out there. And I will say that I did start to see some improvement in Cole's K's fighting as the season went on. So I'm hoping that on Baddies USA, we continue to see that improvement in her fighting and she starts to really do her big one. Because we did kind of see that with Summer. You know, if you look at Summer on Midwest versus Africa, there was a big improvement in her fighting. So I'm hoping the same effect happens on Cold Killer. And lastly, we're going to move on to our A's. So my A minuses are going to be Rollie and Diamond. And my A is going to be Fauna. Okay, so Rollie, I gave most valuable 13 times. I gave her least valuable twice. DTB, I was actually surprised at myself, but you know, I had to be fair, which is why I actually wanted to count how many times I gave people most valuable this time. I gave DTB most valuable 18 times out of 25 times. She actually had the most valuables for a season. Now, did I feel that way about her overall on the season? No. I probably would have rated her in the B section if I didn't actually count how many times I gave her most valuable. But I couldn't deny, even when I didn't agree with everything she did, she was entertaining and she was funny. So I gave her points for that. And DTB was only a least valuable for me once this season. Fauna was most valuable 13 times and she was never a least valuable. So I will say for the most part this season, I did like Diamond. You know, she's a troll, but I also felt like she was a real bitch, especially to a lot of the new girls. The only thing I didn't really like that she did this season was continuing to drag the issue with Choco, which I felt was really no issue. After a while, she could have just let that go and actually got to know Choco. And I also didn't like how at some point when Ivory was in the house, she was low-key ducking Choco. Whether people tried to say she was playing or not, she did let Ivory fight Choco when there was no reason for that. And then as far as the reunion went, you know, I feel like she should have been more ready for Natalie. You snuck Natalie multiple times, so stay ready so you don't got to get ready. So, I mean, she didn't do her big one at the reunion. Natalie broke her nose. So, you know, I gave her an A minus. Rollie gets an A minus this season. She almost got an A. You know, there were only a few things that she did I didn't like. Like I said, she was playing Natalie's role. So at certain points, she was being messy because that's what Natalie does. So I guess that's the things that made me not really give her an A and just give her an A minus. But I did like the growth that she showed this season. I like that she was neutral. She got along with the new girls. She tried getting along with Natalie and Scotty for the most of the season. And she also got along with Dolly, Summer, and Lex. You know, she was able to have conversations with everybody, be a voice of reason, do Natalie's job when Natalie wasn't present, facilitate conversations between the ladies. When it came down to Tavy's chain getting taken by Dolly, Natalie tried to get the chain from Dolly multiple times, couldn't get it. As soon as Rollie asked for it, Dolly gave it right up. So, you know, I do see that the girls have a lot of respect for Rollie. And like I said, I do like the growth on her. The only thing I really wish that she would have did was gave me Baddie South Rollie at the reunion and fought Natalie. If she would have did that, she probably definitely would have got an A. I'm not gonna lie. And next we got Fauna with an A. While I feel like out of her group with K Rican and Cole K, I do feel like she has the driest personality of the three. I won't deny that. I feel like they had a lot more quotable and funny things to say than Fauna. But when I look at it morally, everything that Fauna did this season, I could see a reason why she did it. There was nothing she did this season where I was just like, I don't understand why she did that, or I was just completely against it. And I like that she wasn't afraid to stand up to Natalie and check Natalie even on her first season. So overall, I did like Fauna, and she was the only person who I couldn't really find too many faults in. So I had to be fair and give her the A. So with that being said, my most valuable newbies of Baddies Africa are Fauna and Cold Killer. My most valuable OGs of Baddies Africa are Rollie and DTB. And my most valuable new G of Baddies Africa is Ivory. My least valuable OG of Baddies Africa is Natalie. My least valuable newbies of Baddies Africa are Latina, Russian, and Elsie. And my least valuable new Gs of Baddies Africa are Summer and Dolly. Okay, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that update on my season rankings and also my individual rankings on all of the baddies from Baddies Africa. And I know that they finally dropped the super trailer tonight. That's what I was waiting for to finish up my Baddies USAT video. So I should be dropping that for you guys tomorrow, where I'm going to basically give my preseason thoughts on every lady on the cast, which will also involve me talking about all of the tea that we've heard concerning each lady for this season. All right, so I'll see y'all tomorrow for the Baddies USA teaser slash trailer slash tea recap. Until then, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.